Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch. Today, I got to sit down and have a wonderful conversation with Jesse Griffiths. For those who are unfamiliar, Jesse Griffiths is a chef. He's an author of two wonderful books, Afield and the Hog Book, above me here. And he also runs the restaurant Dai Due in Austin. He's a co-owner there, which is a phenomenal place to go eat. He also is the head of the new School of Traditional Cookery, great hunting, outdoors related school, really teach you about, kind of A to Z. If you're a new hunter and you never hunted before, you're learning gun safety, you're learning how to shoot, you're learning about where to target an animal. For those who may be more experienced, kind of the latter side of that thing, as far as, butchering, cooking, putting together, packaging your meat for different meals, and just having a wonderful experience. He's been in 14 years doing that. We discuss a recent trip that he had out to Europe. We talk about food, culture, some information on, what you need to do is kind of some 101 stuff if you're out there hunting this fall. We had such a wonderful conversation. We covered so many great things. Jesse is just a great man, wealth of knowledge, and we talk about how sharing that knowledge is an important thing too. And he does just that in the myriad of all the things he's involved with, including his time with MeatEater. You've probably seen him on the television show there, as well as the podcast, Joe Rogan's podcast, a lot of different places that you may be familiar with him. And if you're not, those are all wonderful shows and interviews I highly suggest you check out. Jesse's just a great guy, and it was an honor to have him here on the podcast today. And I know you guys are going to really enjoy it. So check out the links below for all the different things that he's involved in. Go check those out, please. I think you're really going to enjoy it. And without further ado, here is the podcast with Jesse Griffiths. Hey, Jesse, how you doing today, man?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, man. It's nice to be able to sit down and do some this interview and this podcast, and we talked about it for a little while. So it's really great that you're joining me today, man. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. To be honest, I'm just doing it because you got such a big blackberry patch out there, and
Yeah, yeah.
I'm ready to come ransack that thing come next May. You keep sending me pictures of it, and so I'm just trying to sweeten you up.
Well, I
Uh,
appreciate that. At least you're honest about it, and
yeah,
I know how to bait you in quite literally with dewberries and blackberries.
yeah. I mean, and big fat ones too. I mean, let's be clear. That's some good looking berries you got out there. So here I am.
Well, if you like Mustang grapes too, then maybe I can lure you in and we'll do another podcast down the road too.
I think that I'm at heart like a 1950s grandmother because, I mean, and all the hog hunting and flounder sticking that I'm supposed to be doing, I really like making jams and jellies a lot too. So
Uh-huh.
come summer, it's like I'm in my kitchen. I have a little frilly apron I put on. Actually, I don't, but I do quite enjoy that. So you can usually sucker me in with a good fruit haul because I will try to put it in jars. I'm obsessive about it. So.
Right. Well, man, I kind of wanted to chat a little bit about, your recent trip. You just went out to Europe, and you kind of hit a bunch of different places. While it's fresh on your mind, why don't you tell me a little bit about that? Some of the amazing experiences you had out there, some of the things you ate, because I'm sure you had some amazing meals as well.
Absolutely. I mean, really, it's kind of a background deal for me. Europe was very formative in my career. Like I went to Italy on January 1st of the year 2000, and your younger listeners probably won't realize what great peril I was in being in an airplane over the ocean when they thought that every computer in the world was going to stop working for why it's called Y2K. You can Google it.
Yep.
Um, so I flew on. I was there at like the first day of the century, and I landed in Italy. And since when I went back a few times after that, and I mean, long story short, it really informed my cooking style, my sourcing style, and I mean, pretty much just the rest of my life. Just seeing the way that people functioned over there by just dealing with the resources that they had on hand and making the most of it. And in Italy, I mean, anywhere really. I mean, you can go to Mexico or Morocco or Vietnam, and people just making the most of it. And sometimes it's very beautiful. And that was the first time I'd really seen that. So going back to Europe after quite a long time, just got busy and I hadn't been. And so finally took this trip. I went with my girlfriend, with my daughter, and it was both of their first times to be there. And it was good. I did a very good job of it. I ate all the sea creatures and I drank all the wine. They
Nice.
actually, I think they ran out. um, and it was very good. We started in Paris, did kind of the big city experience, and I have a little obsession with the old restaurants there. I love a place that's been open for 150 years. I think that's cool, and just like I pretty much had the same menu the whole time, and from the looks of it, it's maybe the same waiters. Uh, and just we're every night we're just hitting one of these different like classic bistros or brasseries and ordering all that classic French food. We're eating creme brulee and moule frite and steaks and fries and snails and pates and lots of foie gras, things like that. And it's just it's so much fun, just to get into that culture, that old sense of it, where it's like these products have been present in France forever, and this is the standard. And almost every restaurant has the same menu, which I also think is really cool. I mean, some are obviously better than others, but they have this kind of cultural appreciation for a standardization of what you're going to eat. You're going to see these classic dishes over and over and over, and they don't go in and try to adulterate them. You're going to get a creme brulee. There's not going to be a raspberry on it or a cookie, and they're not going to make it coffee flavored or anything like that. They're just going to do it, as God intended with vanilla, and it's quite good. And we went from there to Portugal, and I'd never been there before. And lovely. I mean, geographically, you can kind of get an indication of what you're going to eat there because it's just sticking out there in the Atlantic, and it was just all about seafood. And I love seafood. I just like I can't get enough. I'm excited by any kind of seafood, if it's in a shell or or fish, whatever. I'll eat it. And we ate it all. I'm obsessed with sardines. I love fried sardines and grilled sardines, and I love sardines in cans. And so we ate lots of all of those. And all the flatfish. It's cool. You come in from flounder country over here in Texas, and you go
Hmm.
into a fish market there, and you see five different kinds of flatfish. You've got your turbo and your brill and your sole and your sand dabs, all these little different shapes and sizes and variations of these. Basically, looks like a flounder, and it's really cool to see all of those too, and then eat them. you know, Salt cod. Lots of potatoes, not a lot of vegetables kicking
Hmm.
around Portugal,
Right.
which is fine. We just ate fish every meal. It was very fun. From there, we went to what I consider to be the food capital of the world, which is San Sebastian, Spain, which just has the most iconic style of dining. I think it's this. They don't call it tapas there; it's called pinchos, and they're these little bites, and the way you do it, or you can do it however you want, but you kind of roll from spot to spot. You drink a very small amount. You order a couple items that are typically like the specialty of the house at a place like that, and then you keep moving. And you can try a multitude of things. The products there are incredible. There's mountains hitting the ocean, so you've got this mix of agriculture, game, a lot of very good beef, very different beef than what we have here, but nonetheless, like, incredibly good, incredibly deeply flavored beef, and then the seafood, which is just again out of this world. It's also right there on the Atlantic, and then this culture of appreciation of food in the Basque Country of Spain that's kind of unparalleled. I mean, they're almost just hyper focused on it. It's one of the most important aspects of that culture, and it really shows. They take real good care of you there. Everything from like ham, which is some of the best hams in the world, the Iberico
Hmm.
hams, which is actually the species, or not species, but the breed that was initially imported to the United States back in the 1500s. So the great 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 grandfathers of our feral hogs here in Texas came from this area. And so just a very high grade pork there, and they know exactly what to do with it. They put salt on it, and then they wait, and it's very good. From there, we went to Bordeaux, which obviously is a big wine place, but also some more classic French food. And we just kept at it. Just I'm ordering the craziest things that I can see. I ate some lampreys there in Bordeaux. The little sucker. I don't know, to fish. I guess it's like the snaky fish with all the teeth on it.
Right.
These river lampreys, which is a classic Bordelaise dish there. So like braised with red wine and mushrooms and leeks, and served on toast. Just some like crazy stuff like that. Just but freshwater fish, which is really interesting to get in other cultures because I think we're such a freshwater fish like culture here. It's in Central Texas. Like
Right.
we value our catfish and our bluegills and all that, and it's not something that's maybe, I don't know how to put it, but maybe like widely advertised in other places. It's not something that's usually a real strong aspect of a food culture, and it's really interesting because to go somewhere else and eat freshwater fish. Whenever I go somewhere and I have the opportunity to try somebody else's freshwater fish, I'm all in. I'm just always very curious about that, whether it's like perch and whitefish around the Great Lakes, which they still have commercial fisheries for,
Hmm.
or I see lampreys on the menu in Bordeaux, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting it. So, tried some lamprey, and then back to Paris for one more night, and then back home to this lovely weather that everybody had waiting for me here.
Yeah, man, we had it ready cooking up for you. We wanted to make sure you had the true arrival back into the armpits of hell.
Yeah, it's preheated for sure. I think that I was feel well done at this point. It's a friend of mine told me that if he had that little turkey pop temperature thing on him, it would be popped out at this
I
point.
know. Well, I've seen some like pictures online and stuff of like some, there's like this old grandmother here in the Houston area who put in some bread inside like it's like a brick covered mailbox and made bread, and you hear about these kind of stories, but it's like it's
That's
happening right
amazing.
now.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it's rough. I mean, it's
yeah.
rough. I mean, I know you like to be outside. I like to be outside, and
Hmm.
this is the time of year where it's just like it's a struggle. It's like you face this bit of like, I don't know if it's a depression. So you want to get out in it. It's like you going to the coast is an option, but you can get hammered by the sun down there. Going to the lake. I mean, you can go stand in a river and catch some bluegills right now.
Yep.
But the opportunities are few and far between right now.
Totally. Well, being out, in the ranch when we're out there working, it's like you got to pick your time real wisely, wake up early, and you're doing the late night stuff. A lot of things like, even just filling feeders and stuff. We're dumping the corn, and then, it's like we're doing that at like 11 at night whenever
Mhm.
it's like when it's bearable, even then, that's a
When it's in
questionable
the high
statement.
80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, is there anything that while you were there in your trip, things you ate and or maybe how you saw things prepared that kind of maybe inspired you to do some dishes when you're coming back here, something that you kind of bring back from there that you think you'll have, and maybe in whether it's in the restaurant in Dai Due or whether it's something that you're just doing for yourself.
Sure. I'm really familiar with most of those cultures' food already, and I've already
Right.
explored a lot. And there's a couple new things that we have, but mostly it's just kind of like you're kind of hitting the reset button on just tasting food in another beautiful place and with maybe a language that you don't understand very well, um, and around people that are living that every day. And sometimes it's, I think, more than a specific or an acute um, recipe or preparation or something like that. I think it's more of a overarching attitude, or just to remember why and how people enjoy food in different places. And it's always just such a nice perspective, to think that, in Portugal, 6-year-olds eat sardines all the time, so it's like, it's not gross, it's like, whereas, maybe they would think certain aspects here are. And I think it's just, for me, it's always just mostly about perspectives and eating fresh food. And I mean, it just always makes me kind of reinvigorated about our goals as far as the businesses and the things that we do, but be it Dai Due, the new School of Traditional Cookery, or books, or whatever we're working on. Just like we're on the right path, because you can see how these food cultures interact with their resources, um, and it's a beautiful thing. and they've done it in some really great ways. I'll tell you, I did experience this one very cool thing. It's not about food per se. It's kind of ancillary to food,
Hmm.
but it is about it was something that happened in Portugal that we witnessed that I thought was really interesting as far as management of game, or not really game, management of animals. And that we lucked into going into this hike up in the national forest. There's only one in Portugal, so we were in that one. I've been to every one of them, every not Portuguese
Check it
natural
off the
forest.
list. Yeah.
What you're doing, but I'm over here going to every one of them. So we're up there and we're hiking and literally swimming in these waterfalls, which is quite nice, quite cold also, which I'm missing right now.
Right. Right.
But we happened to be there on the weekend of a wolf festival. So um, all the locals, and these villages are ancient. They're still made out of these stone houses. They're still like little aqueducts running under the streets. There's these crystal clear streams in the mountains, and I mean there's running water and electricity, but these houses are, I don't know, 200 or 300 years old
Right.
probably. And there's a lot of they raise a lot of beef up there, and there's a little bit of agriculture. And it's classically had a bit of a wolf problem. And in fact, we were able to see a wolf trap where they had this giant V constructed on the side of a mountain. And at the end of it was a pit, a rock lined pit that was really deep. And they would bait it with some live goats or sheep or whatever and entice the wolves to get in there. And then they would drive the wolves down into this pit. And this was, going on probably a couple hundred years ago. And then the way it was described to me, that the people and the government kind of came to the consensus that they needed to stop killing the wolves. But the problem is that the wolves are still eating calves and still inflicting some financial damage on the people there. And so their solution, which I just found this totally fascinating, their solution was to every once a year, and we happen to be there on this weekend, is to have this wolf festival. And it was so special to be there for that. So what the purpose of it is this town throws this festival, and it draws in mostly locals and other Portuguese. There's very few international tourists there, but there's a lot of people there. And it's a big party. The way it was described to me is that they stay up till like 10 a.m. There's a lot of singing, there's a lot of dancing, there's a lot of drinking of this stuff that's like, I tried it. It was good. I don't know if I could drink it till 10 a.m. But that's what they're doing. It is a full on mountain party done in their style, and very, very cool. And they raise a bunch of money. They're selling art, they're selling food, they're selling beer, they're selling whatever, tickets to get into this thing, and they're raising money. And then the funds from that go to help people who have lost livestock to the wolves. And I was just like, I was so taken by that. Such a positive approach to it, a harmonious approach, but it was an approach also not inflicted on them by a government, but their own idea to say, hey, we actually want the wolves. We know that the wolves are inflicting harm on our these herds. And it's very high quality beef. They probably can't afford to lose any of that, but they
Right.
are willing to take the loss. But then they figured out how to literally monetize the wolves to pay for the loss. And I was that kind of unique approach, and that just entirely positive approach, which I understand can be applicable anywhere. I mean,
Sure.
I don't think we're going to have a Laredo Coyote Fest any time soon. It just doesn't work that way. But just to see again perspectives on things and the way that it affected beef production,
Hmm.
in this instance, really really interesting to me. And I think that's the best thing about travel, is just seeing how other people do it. I love it, because I think the worst thing we can ever do is assume that we're ever right, and it's cool to go and just see. Not to say that, like I said, that solution is going to apply anywhere, but they figured something out, and I was like, that is a really net positive solution to that issue.
Absolutely. That's it's incredible what you see in traveling different cultures. I mean, as you know, I used to travel around and visit with indigenous elders and kind of put together their life stories and words and messages and just kind of, be a conduit for that, and just seeing how all the different cultures operate, and kind of bringing it back to what you're talking about, like where you were, and in certain areas where like food in that culture, and like the focus of not just like, okay, we got to order and it has to be here quick and we got to go, and like you're sitting down and enjoying your friends and your family and all the things that are around you that come to the table that are kind of, local for the most part there too, because it's like those that, and it kind of, that just reminded me of probably just that connectivity that you have too, of like with Dai Due. And if you can kind of talk about, your restaurant there, and the idea of like that, I feel like there's an embracing of the culture there. I mean, when I went there, I don't know how many hours we were in our table, but we would just get food and enjoying it. And it just felt like I don't know, it was a transition to another kind of place and time, and like being able to enjoy all these different things from Texas that were from that region. Some stuff that was, wild animals that, obviously kind of go through the USDA process and things there too to get to the plate, but having things that were grown around and, growing around. And it was, that was something that was special. I know that kind of, locavore, whatever people want to call that, movement, that's something that, as far as that culture and everything, was important to you. And I think still is there. And if you can maybe kind of touch that and how you connect to that idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can view it. I think that I one of the key components is that I really enjoy kind of being confined by ingredients.
Hmm.
Like, I can't get salmon, I can't get macadamia nuts, I can't get a pineapple, which is the one that really kills me because I love pineapple. Um, Actually, I take that back. We grew a pineapple once. We grew this tiny little pineapple. Anyway, so it was fair game. It was fair game. I love that. Just like your palette, your color palette is defined by what people are growing, what the weather is, and what the region can support, and then you kind of start to create your own language from that. And we're really late to the game in a way in this country, as far as abiding by that, because we've always had a bounty, and we're a relatively modern country too. We didn't come about until, I mean, in its current incarnation, only a couple centuries
Yeah.
at this point. So all these other food cultures have had centuries and centuries and centuries to develop what they have resource wise, and then fine tune that into these cuisines. But on the other side of that, what that does is it gives you a blank slate to kind of create whatever kind of food culture you want here, because it is new, and to say, hey, let's just take all the ingredients that we have, and then, since ideas are fair game, we can just like look around the world and see how a different culture deals with a tomato, or deals with a pepper, or deals with an oily fish, or deals with beef. And we can start to apply those ideas to what we've got here, which is the way that it's always been done, with immigration and conquering and things like that. Like Spain is a great example of that, where, you have some French influence, you have Carthaginian influence, you have Celtic influence, and then, of course, you have the Northern African Moorish influence, all combining to make this amazing cuisine that is rooted deeply in the history of the people plus the ingredients.
Sure.
And so here, even more so, we're able to utilize a pretty wide array of ingredients. I mean, like I said, we don't have everything, but it's not nothing. It's pretty cool. And even this is probably the hardest time of year. We're the next 2 to 3 months are the hardest time of year to try to assemble something in Texas. It's like even the tomatoes are done for a minute. We're between the first and second crops, and so our palette is a little bit limited right now. But what it does is it enables us to just pull every trick in the book out culturally from all these beautiful cultures that have come and settled here, um, and contributed their ideas to our ingredients. So I mean, we have, obviously, Mexican culture is just deeply, deeply rooted in South Texas and Central Texas. I mean, for that matter, Vietnamese culture is too. Starting in the '80s, you just really saw an influx of people coming from Vietnam, which I consider to be one of the finest cuisines in the world.
Yeah.
For being a country of that size to make such a hefty and indelible contribution. And so we have the benefit of all these great ideas and influences, and then a somewhat constricted array of ingredients, but still at the end of the day we have plenty to work with, even in the hardest times. And that's when you learn to preserve, so right now, if you like, I was at the restaurant yesterday morning. It was very sunny. It's probably around 11 in the morning, and every sunny spot out in front of that restaurant and behind that restaurant had sheet trays of peppers out there, because I mean the sun's good for something right
Yeah.
now. I mean, it's like, and what it is, it's like, you want to dry a pepper, we're talking like 6 hours. I mean, it's going to be done. That thing is just microwaved. I mean, but that's great. Now we've dried the pepper, and the pepper's good for years. We've preserved it. We can rehydrate it. We can turn it into a powder. We make our own paprika, and we have a variety of different peppers drying right now. So preservation is really key as well. I mean, and preservation can mean a lot of different things too. I mean, it's old school, like drying something in the sun, which is probably like the oldest form of
Yeah.
preservation, all the way to what I consider is also in bounds, and that's throwing it in the freezer, or pickling it, and so whatever it takes. And so right now, it's kind of slow. We don't have as many customers, but we have all these summer bounties kind of coming in, whether it's garlic, or when we do get some big tomato crops or green tomatoes or peppers or things like that, it's time to preserve. And so we are doing a vast amount of pickling. We have to make all of our bread and butter pickles and all of our dill pickles. I mean, we have to make all of our pickles that go on our cheeseburger within probably a 2 or 3 month stretch, because for the entire year.
Yeah.
So we are buying hundreds of pounds of cucumbers at a time. The walk-in is just packed. You can't walk in there. It's just like, it's so full of pickles and everything that we're just trying to put up. But that's the fun of it too. And I think it's just like, that's the challenge, and it comes with, over time you start to develop this sequence, this schedule throughout the year, and it's like, we need to push through. October's the tricky month. It's like, you think things are about to turn around. It's just like the weather. You're like, oh, it's October. It's about to. No, it's not. No,
No.
it's not. I'm sorry. It's still going to be pretty hot. I mean, you might get that odd cool front that like everybody just stands outside and absorbs. But the produce still doesn't show up, and then in November it just starts popping again, and then by December it's incredible, and it's just that cycle. And so you just grow to appreciate it. And I think that's just my favorite thing about just using the resources that we have, is that you kind of have to just get into this groove of listening, and also rolling with punches. A flood, a drought, a hailstorm can all do, devastating things, at the wrong time. A hail hits at the wrong time. It can take out an entire year of the wine industry.
Sure.
It can take out an entire peach crop. And by that, I mean, like, of the whole region. If we get a massive hailstorm when the flowers are still on the trees, and then there's nothing to turn into a fruit, one night it can happen. A flood, drought, high temperatures, all these things, so this year it's pretty good. It's a rainy spring.
Yeah.
It got hot really fast, and the real casualty of that was the tomatoes went away real quick. They just don't like it. But we in Texas have two distinct tomato seasons, so the fall tomatoes, they'll be here. It's like, just no BLT on the menu for a while, but it'll be back in the fall.
So are there some, like, it sounds like tomatoes, cucumbers, obviously you're doing pickles. Are there some other staples, like for your restaurant, that you are kind of like, some of those things? I know, like, down in South Texas, there are some amazing citrus. And I know you kind of get the big bags as you're going through too. I mean, that's how I kind of grew up too. It's like every time my uncle would come and show up, we'd have massive bags of like grapefruit and things like that coming to us. My family lived down in the valley there too. But so I figured that maybe citrus is one too. Is there some other staples that you have from Texas that are kind of like those go-to that you may preserve or prepare throughout the year?
I mean, sauerkraut is a huge one. We will make tons and tons of sauerkraut, and that's usually around November when the first
Hmm.
cabbages start to come in, and then again, hundreds of pounds of cabbage will start hitting because we have a great pastrami sandwich, and we have to have enough sauerkraut for that thing to go year round.
Yep.
So, yeah, citrus is a tricky one. Citrus has been something that, I mean, first off, it's a very popular item, and if I got to do the elevator speech on the restaurant, I often talk about iced tea, and you'll be able to identify this with the property out there. Our
Hmm.
tea is made out of yopon holly, so we get green tea, we get black tea, and we make our iced tea out of yopon. It's the only native plant in North America that contains caffeine, and it produces a great tea. Most people want a lemon with their tea. In the past 3 years, we've probably had lemons for about 2 or 3 months. And that is because of two devastating freezes. And then there's also some really bad citrus diseases happening in the valley. And so when you're monoculture, when you have a lot of the same thing in one area, it's really apt to, get sick.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
learned that. And so citrus has been tough. We still get pretty consistent limes, and then like you said, when I'm driving through South Texas, like if we're down there doing a nilgai hunt or something like that, and I see that roadside stand and it's packed full of valley lemons and those sweet oranges, I am going to fill the truck with those because I know that we can't get them anywhere else, and they're really special. And I think that the take home there is just like for me, it's just super fun to not be able to have something. Like, oh, can I have a lemon with my tea? And it's like, well, I'm sorry. Not only am I going to deny that lemon, but I'm going to tell you a little story. Like, you don't get a lemon with your tea. I wish we had a lemon with the tea. It doesn't even cost extra, but we just don't have them. And here's why: it's because these are what we abide to as far as the standards of this restaurant. And until our region can support lemons, we're not going to have them. I think there's a lesson in that too, and it's just like it forces people to pay a little bit of attention to it. Like I thought lemons just grew on trees, and it's like they do, but they grow on trees in other places. Or limes, for example, they do grow on trees, and they mostly come from Mexico. And most of that industry now is controlled by the same cartels that control a lot of drugs. So when you're buying a lime or an avocado, there's a fair chance that some of that money went into the pocket of the Zetas or Sinaloa. Like, no kidding. Like, I mean, and so the other side of this is who you're buying from. We buy almost all of our citrus from the same person, you know,
Yep.
um, and so it's a connectivity, also, and it's support. It's keeping your money in the right places. I just assume not pay a cartel for a lime.
Yeah.
Just assume, get my organic limes from the valley, from GNS Groves, where I know where the money's going, and so forth. So, and that applies to beef, and that applies to oysters, that applies to everything. So, I think it's just a really unique opportunity to highlight those, and that all came from, can I have a lemon in my tea, right? And then also, the yopon, which is not invasive, but it's omnipresent in a lot of East Central Texas. It grows everywhere down there. I personally love yopon because it doesn't have thorns.
Yep.
Because like a lot of the other stuff that grows under trees here will hurt you, and yopon you'd have to struggle to get hurt by yopon. It's a relatively soft plant, so it has my appreciation.
So where are you getting that if it's not a trade secret? I mean, is this something that there's someone who gets this and distributes this, or is this something
Yeah,
that, foraging yourself? I mean, I'm sure you
no,
probably do some foraging too, but
a little bit. I mean, not for the restaurant. The thing is, it's
right.
like there's multiple sources for yopon.
Hmm.
We're using Cat Spring yopon, and I think the importance there is enabling even small industry to utilize this resource. Like, we're importing tea from all over the world, which means it has to get on a boat.
Right.
Okay. And so that right there is not super sustainable. Not
Yeah.
to just throw that word around, but
Yeah.
how much sense would it make if we could just enable an industry here to start utilizing yopon, which grows like crazy all over the place and tastes just as good, if not better, than these other tea leaves. And so rather than going and doing it ourselves, I think there's also a lot of value in supporting a business monetarily to empower them. And hopefully they go to the next level, and then hopefully some other business looks at that and says, hey, I want to do that too. And then you've got two businesses that are out there scooping up Yopon from under all these trees out in East Texas. And then soon we'll have 50 businesses doing that. And every pound of Yopon tea is one less pound of tea that we have to import from somewhere else that was grown under, we don't know, and how well were their workers treated and how well were their workers paid, and so forth. There's just a real chain to that. So I think that when you can find a business that'll do it too, it's really important to empower them.
Well, and I feel like there's kind of like a good pivot here when talking about like wild hogs. You talk about like businesses that, we can help to sustain, our economy here, our workforce here, something that's local as well. And then, we have something in kind of on a flip side there. It's like we got an invasive species that is causing, billions of dollars of damage throughout our country. But it's something here that many people utilize as table fare. And I mean, you've kind of had, a good portion of your career has been something that you've been bringing about the awareness of how delicious wild hog is. And, there's a lot that you kind of obviously with that as far as information and education and some entertainment there too, that you're kind of, teaching folks as well. And while it's something that, you can't just go and get it and put it easily on your restaurant floor, there's definitely some steps and things you have to do to make sure that you go through all the regulations and such too. But maybe if you can kind of talk about it, your idea of why that is important, that we are saving the world by eating wild hogs.
Right. I mean, and that's a gross exaggeration too.
Right.
And I'll admit that
It's a
because
great
there's going
shirt.
to be, yes, exactly. Because there's going to be a guy at A&M that's going to be like, you're never going to eat your way out of this problem. And I'm like, yes, sir, I know. Like, but however, my role in it is I'm not concerned with the live hogs. I'm concerned with the dead hogs. Like, if you want to eat a freshly dead hog, then I'm your guy. Like, that's where we can talk. And you can kill all the hogs you want and do whatever you want with them. I don't care. But if you're curious about it and you want to figure out how to utilize them, I think that's where we step in. And I totally understand that we're not going to use, bolt action rifles to get our way out of this issue that we have with this very effective invasive species. But I've always viewed them as an incredible resource. I mean, it's almost just a hyperbolic resource in that it's so destructive and just so generally bad that you have to take it out. You need to. And then what a gift it is that they are edible, because what would it be like if they weren't? Like if they were completely inedible, which I've also been told they were, which is news to me. So I think that they're really fascinating in that, but I also think it's a really complex problem because as much as, I'd like to turn the whole state into a giant hog factory, there's some issues with monetizing them or adding too much value to hogs. Some states even experimented with banning hog hunting for a while to see if that worked, because they felt that the hunting of them was encouraging people to stalk and move them around, which was what happened here originally. Mm-hmm. Somebody in West Texas is like, man, I'm sure bored in the off season. The guy in East Texas is like, hey, I got a solution for you. I got a couple pigs in a trap. And at the time, not thinking like, oh, this is the worst idea. So, to like bring the first two pigs over to this county. Now, granted, most of it happened naturally, but some of it happened because of hunting. And so I think some states looked at that and they said, hey, let's try this. Did it work? No, it did not work. But no, the rampant demonetization or the devaluation of hogs didn't work. I mean, it's gonna require something a bit more severe. Now, poisoning severe, I don't know if that's it either. But eating them, I don't know, but I do feel that as a protein and as a cultural resource, it's a very viable thing to have in the restaurant. And I really think that if you go to a restaurant, sometimes it normalizes things or just it puts it in a context of like, oh, hey, and if we can put that out to the public, like, oh, these things are good to eat, and then maybe this person's not a hunter, but maybe their neighbor is, and he's like, hey, do you want this hog leg? And then they're like, you know what, I've heard and I recently had, and the exoticism was removed, or the preconceptions or the things that they assumed about it, the negative things. And then they'll be like, yeah, I'll take the hog leg. And then that's shifted over, and then he has more room in his freezer for more of it, and then maybe another pig can die. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's just an incremental thing, and it's an education, and it's going to take the whole team on board for that. And so I think that, between biologists, I mean, basically what I'm saying is people smarter than me need to work on it. And it's going to be biologists, parks and wildlife, people in the front lines, um, as well as people in the food industry, like myself, all simultaneously working on this issue. People that work in feeding mass amounts of people, be that in schools, in prisons, whatever. It's just like let's find a home for the meat, but we have to walk that very fine line of not getting to the point where people are considering them to be so valuable that they're making more of them.
Right. Well, I mean, I've seen, there's a lot of even like, high fence operations, and, we kind of saw that there too. And, the hunting show that where we met up at, where they had like a funneling system on the outside, and they're baiting inside, and then they're bringing them in, and then they're, monetizing a hunt, which is, however people want to see that and view that, they're these local hogs that are around, and they're bringing them in, and then there's a charge for hunt, and then help them butcher and stuff and have some meals and things too. And there's a lot of people who were there during that particular hunt who had never had that before and had that experience. And then obviously at the very end of this hunt for this television show, you came out and cooked 4 different dishes, all of which were absolutely delicious, and really kind of give people an idea of the variety of things you can do with them. Because I know right above me over here the Hog Book, and it's the hogbook.com, where people can go check that out. There's so many different ways that you talk about preparing them, and you have them kind of sectioned up in the idea of like age class, or weight class rather, as far as sour, boar, and maybe if you can tell me, just talk to folks a little bit about your book. But I was kind of getting to the idea there that it seems like there's a lot of people who they're like, oh, we're going to monetize this problem, and then being able to offer these hunts. But then at the same time, it's like, well, you're kind of funneling through and taking them out. It's like some people may disagree with that, or some people may agree with it. But it's a very complicated issue in our state. But I think the bottom line that I'm seeing, as far as an end user on my side, is I see them, I am trapping them, I am shooting them, and I am eating them, and I am sharing them with people, because it's a very, very amazing tasting animal. And if you're doing it right, and like even those big boars, oh, those are horrible. I've cooked up some 250 pounders that were delicious. So, if you can maybe touch to your book, and maybe just talk to folks a little bit about that, and, the James Beard award-winning book, as it is too.
Yeah. Well, first I'd like to touch on that. I think funneling hogs into a property for monetizing purposes is 100% a positive. I love that idea. First off, you're introducing people into hunting. You're filling their freezers, and like I said, it's the flow is going the right way.
Yeah,
right there. That's exactly what I'm talking about. I think that when it comes to the monetizing, that's always an argument that you'll hear from Parks and Wildlife. It's like that's their total fear. Their policy is kill all of them. Every last one of them. They want them gone. And so I do love that, and that they're able to get hogs from neighboring, and I'm sure the neighbors love that, pulling hogs off the property into where they're put into the food system, and then they can go and buy my book, and then utilize that, and which, we wanted to do that, but because there was just such either a lack of information or a surplus of misinformation about hogs in general. And I think that the thing that I used to approach the creation of that book was I just listened to everyone's questions, And essentially, that book is just a litany of answers to all these questions. And I heard hundreds and hundreds of questions over the years. I'd be doing a class on venison, and everybody would raise their hand and be like, "What about hogs? What about hogs? What about hogs?" And it was like, I get that there's a little sense of the unknown around these. It's like, I've been told, and that's my favorite one. And so I always leave with that. I've been told that you can't eat them if they are over what? I don't know. Name a number.
Right.
My favorite was 120. And I'm like, get out of here. Are you kidding me? So, like I say in the book, like 119 succulent, 121 gut pile. Got to get the thing out of here. No way. It's just that last little bite of acorns just put him over the edge.
Yeah, man. Or dewberries even. Yeah.
Dewberries. Exactly. So, and that was kind of the impetus for creating the book, is to answer these questions and kind of compile that. But then what I needed to do is to put it into an approachable protocol or a system that wasn't going to be like overly complicated. Be like, let's analyze the amount of fat that's in this pig and multiply that by the number of years you think it is, and then the weight. And it's like, come on, no, we're not going to do that. The question I would hear a lot, besides the weight, is like, what's your favorite recipe for hogs? And I was always like, I try not to have this snotty answer about that, but I'm always like, I'm confounded by that. I'm like, are we talking about a 3-pound piglet that you got in the trap, or a 275-pound boar that you shot last night with thermal? One of those is going to go on the grill, and one of those is going to get turned into sausage. I'll let you guess which one. So there is no omnipresent universal recipe for hogs, and it's not like a deer. I mean, you could even look at an elk as a giant deer. And you're going to cut it the same, and you're essentially going to cook it the same. Cooking times might vary, but it's such a kind of consistent animal, no matter what the size. If it's a 60-pound hill country doe or a 300-pound elk, you're really going to kind of approach it in a fairly similar way. Hogs aren't like that. And so needed to create a system, a very easy system, generalized system. And that was just by size, small and medium. And then when they get bigger, they kind of branch off into large boar, large sow. And so, your large sow is typically going to be a little more fatty. Your boar is going to be typically more lean and can have some of those stronger flavors, super gamey, or it can be utterly delicious. But we try to just include recipes that would conquer all, and just a real simple equation for everyone to look at. Like, oh, this hog's about 60 pounds, moderate fat, and it's like, intuitively what part of the book to look in. There's a butchery diagram to approach that size of pig. And the smaller the hog, the bigger the cuts. The little pig, you cut into 7 pieces, and that's it. The medium hogs, there's a little more variety that you can get, and then you get into a large sow, and then sky's the limit. You can start doing all these cool cuts with it, and so forth. And so, just try to categorize it as such, and then have the comparable and applicable recipes following each of those. We do some stories. We talk about trapping. We talk about hunting at night. Talk about some techniques with hunting hogs, and it was well received, and I'm glad, because the reason is because everybody kind of told me what to do. Like I said, it's like it wasn't created in a vacuum. I just was listening to hunters like yourself and just everybody. And, they would ask me a question. Maybe I didn't know the answer at the time, and we tried to figure it out, or maybe we would really develop a plan over the years, at New School of Traditional Cookery, where we're cooking a lot of pigs, or in the restaurant where we're having a lot of success or not a lot of success with this, and able to kind of refine these points, but always hearing those questions. And I call it a constituency, and it is. I mean, it's like, I think that, the hog hunters of the world, it's a constituency right there. And like listening to them. And so they kind of wrote that book, in a way, through their questions and inquiries and curiosities. And so I was able to just go through and use a bunch of compiled information and experience from that, and create it and repackage it and put it back out there, in a digestible format.
And you kind of worked on that for quite a long time. I mean, I know that you worked with Jody because he was possibly the photographer in your first book, Afield, and we can touch on that in a minute. But this was something that you took. Was it 10 years that you kind of put things together? It was quite a
It might have
while.
been close to 11. Really, the bulk of the work was done in the last 2 years.
Right.
But there's some photos in there that were very old. Obviously, you can be like, "That's the same dude."
He looks young.
Yeah, he looks young. What happened? Did he only eat hogs? Like, did that guy eat cobbler for breakfast?
Maybe. Maybe.
Absolutely. Dewberry.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, like it took a while. It was definitely a compilation, and I'm glad it took a while. I mean, sometimes those things need to, and it's like really learning and refining something. But at the same time, it's like I don't want to be typecast as the hog guy.
Right.
It's like
Right.
I killed an embarrassingly low number of hogs last year. I mean, I was mostly like taking other people, and God, I think my daughter killed more than I did, which wouldn't be a lot. But still, we're still in the game, and still the restaurant plows through a bunch of them. I mean, we utilize a lot of feral hog there, and it's part of the reason you go there, to eat wild boar, to eat axis, to eat nilgai, and lately aoudad. We've started. It took me a while, but I'm starting to get. I mean, we're getting legit inspected aoudad in there. Aoudad is kind of my next pet cause. I don't mean to get away from hogs yet, but they suffer from the same thing. So many people are telling me how bad aoudad is.
Oh yeah, you can't eat those. Yeah.
Are we eating the same aoudad? Like, oh, you can't eat a big ram. I'm like, what did I shoot something else? Like, I'm not really sure what I'm eating over here, but it's quite good. And then I started to realize, and you have to be careful in these approaches too, because you don't want to talk down to people. Obviously, I've been cooking for the majority of my life. And it's a skill set that I have. Like working on the engine of my truck is not in my skill set, but it is, however, in somebody else's skill set. And I fully acknowledge that, right? And so you start to realize that when you hear the same things over and over, it's more of an endemic problem in probably preparation and cooking and styles and oversimplifications sometimes when they're cooking game. And I think the aoudad really personified that a lot for me, because I would always follow up that aoudad question. And this would apply to hogs a lot too. In Texas, when and we're going to generalize here for a moment. When a man says, I cooked something, he cooked it on a smoker. Like, how long do you cook it? It means how long does it go on a pit? And the pit is an amazing cooking apparatus. I'm not about to speak disparagingly of the smoker.
Sure.
God, I can run out. I'll get my citizenship revoked.
Back to Portugal.
Yeah, right. All right.
Yeah, it could be worse.
It is a dry heat. And without fat, a dry heat is a very tricky way to cook something. It's a very tricky way to cook something lean. It's a very tricky way to cook something that's lean and tough. Now, lean and tough doesn't necessarily have to be negative. It's just you have to understand what you got to do to that to make it not lean and not tough. And so I'm finding that a lot of times with aoudad, they're approached in the same way that you would approach venison, which is not as tough. Aoudad can be outrageously tough. Even the backstrap of an aoudad, when you're cutting it raw, you have to use more force on your knife. It is just a stronger meat. I mean, just look at that animal. It just looks tougher. I don't know, something about being able to run vertically just kind of like metaphorically makes that animal tougher, right?
Yeah.
And so the animal is a bit tough, and we're speaking figuratively and literally now. That thing, it's just a tough animal. And so you're going to have to approach it differently. I've had some luck grilling the back straps, nice and slow, but getting a good char on the outsides, cooking a medium rare, and then slicing them very, very thin against the grain. and the flavor. That's where I am kind of confounded. It's the flavor. To me, it's great. It's maybe less strong than deer. Maybe I'm only eating aoudad out of the hill country, and they're not eating the same things that the West Texas aoudad are. And I would absolutely, you know, put that out there as maybe there would be a really definitive difference in taste. The aoudad that I've had, and to be honest, I've probably eaten less than 10, but they have all been good, all of them. We're serving them at the restaurant right now, and notably though, we are getting in smaller ones. So we're bringing in lambs and ewes, but we're also getting whatever we can take or whatever we can put our hands on. And so I think we did get one larger ram also, but we're just grinding them. And then somebody will be like, oh, that's just cop out. I'm like, I thought we wanted to just eat them, right? We want to eat them, right? And we're making a kefta, which is like a lightly spiced ground skewer. You just grind it. We grind it with onions and allspice, parsley if we have it in season, and then we put it on a skewer and then we grill that. Very, very simple. You know, we'll add in a little bit of pork fat in there just to moisten it up a little bit, but the flavor on it is incredible. It's very, very good. And so, you know, again, it's we've got this invasive species that's misunderstood, and if we can just take it and put it in context and show people how you can do something with it, then that's great. And like I said, what I really saw with the aoudad especially was that I think more than the hogs, it was cooking techniques where people were going wrong. And when you make these little discoveries, it's not to shame people, but it just helps us educate in a more effective way. It's like, okay, I think that what we need to do is step away from the smoker first off and get the crock pot out. Like that's where we need to go, or the smoker and the crock pot, but not just the smoker, you know. But every once in a while, somebody will have success on the smoker. And then cheers, great. You can do it. You nailed it, you know, and it's like, it's not the easiest thing. But for me, I think it's really about how do we educate the most people on the most effective ways of cooking things most of the time. And that's usually, I'm going to be like, okay, here, this is the easiest way to make this thing good, you know, is to do it this way. And sometimes it's just grinding it. And there's no shame in that. You know, like ground meat is great. There are so many amazing things that you can do with it. It's kid friendly. I mean, you can. There's this. It's such a great way to utilize it. And if you look at your year, maybe you're going to shoot a pig and a deer and an aoudad, and then just don't think about them as three separate things. Just think about them as a whole. It's like, well, that's a big old aoudad. I'll try to do something with the back straps, maybe not, and grind the rest or cut it into stew meat. The deer, I can do a bunch of different things with that. We got tenderloins and ribs and the neck and the tongue, all these great little pieces off the deer. And then the pig, he's going to fill in with some chops and some sausage and stuff, and maybe some of the pig and some of the aoudad will go into a sausage together. And so maybe start to like look at it from a perspective that's a little more holistic, or maybe you're looking at your whole year as far as what cuts you're going to use and what cuts you need and what cuts your family enjoys.
Well, those are all great points, man. And there's something that I saw a lot of in your recipes, and that I wasn't ever doing before, but it was like brining the hog ahead of time. And I mean, with the star anise and all the wonder, I mean, there's some amazing things there too. Is that, I guess let's throw a scenario out there, because this is kind of part of the first chat about like a wild game series. I got some other chefs coming on too that we're going to kind of talk about that, and I'm trying to do this each fall, and so this kind of opens into that. And let's say someone takes a hog here in Texas, and I mean, I know that it can vary in size and everything else there too, but I know that one thing I saw on one of your videos a long time ago was that you're using like contractor bags to, just kind of right at the start, like how are you treating the meat to where you're going to be able to preserve it in the best way and later use it? Because I know some people, they just throw it on the ice and it's sitting there and it's getting wet. And, I think that there's certain folks who don't, maybe they're just going to go drop it off at the processor, and that's fine. And, but for those people who are wanting to even have the best quality meat, if they're doing that, are there some maybe things that you would suggest to folks? Okay, the animal hits the ground. what are you doing in order to best prepare it for then being able to cook it? And then are there some suggestions maybe for like hog, let's say, for instance, are you brining most of those, or is there some technique that you would maybe tell people, hey, this is kind of a 101 thing that I do in order to be able to have that good experience and not be like, oh, this tastes like shoe leather on the
Mm-hmm.
smoker or whatever else, you know?
Right. That's a great question. And I think as far as, the animals on the ground, what do we do next? And I say this in the Hog Book, and there's just two words, just two: cold, dry, cold and dry. However you can achieve that. I'm going to assume that your listeners are all moderately clever, which is very clever. And we got to achieve that however we can. For me, in a cooler with like convenience store ice, that's going to involve a contractor bag, and that's the dry part. The cold part is the ice. There's many different ways. Now, a walk-in cooler, not a freezer, but a walk-in cooler, hands down the best. Cold, flowing air. You can leave a hog in there for maybe 2 weeks, and just keep an eye on it. You can leave a deer in there forever. I recently had a 6-month aged deer leg, and it was phenomenal. No problem. You can let those things hang forever. They don't look great, but once you cut that outer part off, it's good.
Yeah.
I digress. Cold and dry. Cold and dry. So however you want to achieve that. Now, and again, it's kind of like the smoker. After having a lot of conversations, you start to realize that we have almost an emotional response to game sometimes. Let's think about the word that we use when you get a hog down. What do you need to do? You need to clean it. And what kind of things do you clean? You clean dirty things, right? And so how do you clean a dirty thing? You wash it. You need to get it wet to get the dirt off of it, or whatever you associate with dirt, whether that's bacteria or a generic word like germs, something like that. So we need to clean that animal, right? And by getting it wet, it is a very natural response to that, and I completely understand it. It makes a lot of sense, but you're actually enabling a lot of bad things when you do that. It's a vector for bacteria, moisture in any form. If in ice and water, also affects the texture in really terrible ways. And I think that some of the best ways to put it, and I always talk about this in the class. I can use brisket in context, like anywhere. It's great. And brisket is great. Would you go and buy a beautiful Wagyu brisket and then take that out of the package, or maybe you bought it fresh? It's got some age on it, totally marbled. It's going to go on the smoker for however many hours is appropriate. 19. Okay. Are you going to just put that on ice in your cooler? No, you would never do that, because that means not clean, or not dirty. It's already clean, right? For some reason, because in our mind, we would never do that. We would never buy a couple beautiful aged ribeyes and throw them right on ice. Also, because they would turn gray and start to become waterlogged. And when you put them on the grill, the first thing they do is not going to sear; they're going to steam, because all that additional water that you put into the muscle has to come out in the form of steam. And you're going to interfere with what's called the Maillard reaction, the searing, the caramelization, the natural sugars that are present in that meat. You're going to interfere with all that. So keeping things dry has a lot of reasons. It's quality. Also, just when you're dealing with it on the cutting board, when it's just flopping around. If I had a feral hog shoulder that had just hung in a dry walk-in versus one that had been sitting in ice, it's going to, on the cutting board, they're going to look drastically different. Just notably, and one of them is going to look really unappetizing, and that's the one that's been on ice. It's going to be floppy, soft, gray, hard to cut. And then when you go to make sausage with that, all that water will exude at some point. When you grind it, when you cook it, it's got to come out of there. And then when you freeze it, you're freezing all that water that's in there. You're exploding even more cells. You're going to have more water loss from that. I can't begin to say enough how we should not be icing ice water. And I've heard crazy things. I had a guide that worked for me. He said his family used to put hogs in bleach water. Again, the hog is dirty. How do you get it clean? Simplistically, you clean it with the thing that makes things clean, and that thing is bleach. So a mild bleach solution in order to clean the hog. And it's deeply ironic that you're going to introduce something that's so bad for you to take away some perceived thing that's bad for you.
Yeah.
So cold and dry. The contractor bags are a rudimentary and simple way to keep things mostly dry. There's still going to be some condensation. They still insulate to an extent, so they will actually slow the cooling process down a little bit, but it's the best thing that I've discovered for a cooler situation. Like you've got access to ice and a cooler and you got contractor bags. That's the best way to do it, just to keep it off ice. One of the best cooler methods that I ever used was the Yeti ice packs, which freeze below freezing. I had a bunch of those. I shot a medium-sized pig, was able to fit into a 35-quart cooler once it was broken down. I layered those in there with the hog, and that was phenomenal. The quality of that was incredible. I was very happy with that because it kept it so dry, very, very cold and very dry. And it came out and it was almost like it had been in a walk-in.
Nice.
And so I think that was a really beneficial way to do it. If you've got a cold night, which is like what does that even like? Do those words even have any meaning to us at this point? I mean, for reference, if you're revisiting this podcast, it's hotter than you can imagine here right now. It's probably like 108
in the shade.
Yeah. Anyway, but like a cold night, there's been times where I've scheduled hunts around cold nights, thinking like if I get something, just string it up. That's a great way to do it. If you've got temperatures in the 30s or 40s, then that's perfect, because it's usually accompanied by a little breeze, as long as it's not wet. But like I said, cold and dry. Achieve it however you can. Contractor bags, unscented contractor bags.
Yes, please. I've seen the lavender and the whatever it is, and it's like that's not going in my cooler.
Maybe you're into lavender. I mean, it's like you got the marinade started. We're going for a little bit of the south of France vibe, maybe a little bit of rosemary. We already got the lavender.
There's a whole new approach to this now that we're, maybe there's a business here. No,
we'll start selling like contractor bags that are,
pre-seasoning,
pre-seasoned contractor bags. It's not the worst idea.
I've had worse.
Yeah. Then after that, and then sometimes people get confused about the brine because they're like, "Hey, dude, you just told us not to put it in water." And I was like, "Yes, but there's one key component in this water that makes everything different, and that's salt." Okay, so salt changes everything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go into a brine until I had appropriately aged the animal. And by aging, I mean like letting it at least get through rigor mortis. 1 day minimum. Make as few cuts as you possibly can in the first 24 hours on any big game animal. Like I said, as you possibly can. If you're on a mountainside and you're breaking down milk, you're making a bunch of cuts.
Yeah.
Like that's where we're at. If you've got a big hog and a little cooler, you're making some cuts. Just keep it to a minimum. That's all I'm saying. It's just like the more whole you can keep the carcass and cold and dry, the better. For a day, let it go through rigor, then start making your cuts. For a pig, 3 to 5 days for me is great. But so much of this is just we can throw these numbers out, and people have lives and they hunt on the weekend, and then they can come back to it. Maybe they have an hour and a half on Wednesday that looks good, maybe not, just do it when you can, like don't beat yourself up. It's like, it's just gotta move at your schedule. And so just, wait a few days and how long is too long? I don't know. Just keep giving it a sniff. You'll know when it's too long. Trust me. Deer can go way longer. And like I was saying, they can benefit from going for a very long time. Like the steaks off of that deer leg that we had that was 6 months old were incredible. They were more tender than tenderloin. And we're talking top round, eye round, bottom round. These things were just like butter. Very good. You had to trim a lot of oxidized meat off the outside, but once you got to the interior, it's very good. A brine. Let's get back to a brine. So, they're very, very effective. The anise brine recipe that we use in the Hog Book is just kind of a classic in that anise flavor. I think pairs very well with hogs. It kind of tames gamey flavors a bit. There's something to it. I mean, the old spice trade, in Venice, Marco Polo, a lot of the spices were just utilized to cover the flavor of rancid meat. You know, like that was their purpose. It's like they inhabit a spectrum of flavor that somehow negates that of meat that's just not really that fresh or strong. And so
Right.
they have an old purpose in the human brain to help with that. So you have a stronger flavored board, or even something that's not strongly flavored. It still tastes good. Cinnamon is good. The star anise is good. Cloves are good. Those brines also work really well on waterfowl. That brine is great on ducks. It's very nice. So the brine will help season. It'll help moisturize. It adds a little bit of flavors other than salt. So it adds a little bit of anise. It adds a little bit of bay and a little bit of sugar. Sugar's always good. Just a little bit. Humans love the flavor of sweetness. Even if you don't detect it, your brain's thanking you. It's firing off a little bit of like, oh, that's nice. I like sugar. Just like a pinch in there is always good. It also helps with caramelization. So if you're grilling or roasting, that sugar will help that caramelizing, that outside crust develop more rapidly. So it has a lot of benefits. I think brining is a really key concept. But what it also involves is planning. And again, that's kind of along with the smoker and some of these other things is one thing that I run into. People is like, oh, I just don't have time for that, and it's just like part of becoming a better cook is planning. Sometimes it's like, hey, I want to eat this on Wednesday, but it's Monday. It's like, we might want to start thinking about it, or if you're going to braise it and you got a couple free hours on Sunday, go ahead and cook it then and then eat it on Wednesday. It'll be better. Or go ahead and get it in a brine. Let's do that now.
Yeah.
Let's get in front of this instead of rushing things. I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen like, hey, we're going to throw this whole hog on the smoker. I'm like, man, it's 6 p.m. Like, what for tonight?
When are we eating? Is this the Wolf Festival? Is it 10 a.m. that we're going to be?
Is this the Wolf Festival?
What is this?
Exactly. Yeah, a little 10 a.m. snack. So it's like, I think planning, just thinking and one, I keep naming all these kind of, it's not like these pet peeves, but just observations.
Yes.
Time, it's time. And it takes too much time. And, let's put it in the context of, I had this conversation with somebody last year during dove season about plucking doves. And he says, that takes too much time. And he'd been talking about his dove leases. Take you to drive to dove lease. It was like 4 hours. I just looked at him and he was like, yeah. And I was like, exactly. Like, you're spending 8 hours on the road and how many hours in the field? And then, but that 45 minutes of plucking dove time, just put it over the top. I'm like, I think, and it's a mindset, it's like pulling something out and putting it in a brine or plucking that dove. It seems work, and it's like, but if you can reset your brain to start appreciating these things as part of this awesome process that you love from start to finish. I don't think there's a part of the process that I don't like, from going up to Academy and buying some ammo to shooting a pig to, coring the anus, not my favorite part.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be frank. That's probably my least favorite part. Skinning, gutting, I kind of love it. I like sitting around with my friends. I like to drink a little glass of sparkling wine.
Yeah.
With my pig skinning, my pig gutting. Why not? And I quite enjoy that. And then it hangs, and then I like breaking it down. I'll pick a day where I have a couple hours, and you put on a podcast, you get a cup of coffee. If we can just reset our mentalities, I think, a little bit to enjoy these things that are gonna happen. It's like it's gonna be part of it. But if you really want to enjoy it, I think that sometimes you have to like kind of be like, oh, okay, you know what? This thing that I used to kind of hate, like I thought that I would hate, is actually a quite enjoyable part of that process. And at the end, it just has to be done. I mean, people go and fill feeders for hours and hours and hours, but it's like I, I'm not gonna I'm not gonna skin the head of a pig. It takes too long. I'm like, what is time
Relative to what? Right.
relative to what? It's just like we spend so much time doing these other things, and it's just like I watched a crazy video yesterday, and it was in Chinese, and this guy was cooking a camel head. He bought it hair on, and he meticulously took the hair off, scraped it, washed it, scraped it, washed it, then boiled it, opened it up, knocked the teeth out, scraped the palate, did all these things. There was hours and hours and hours of preparation. It was fascinating. And then finally he got it down to this thing, and he made this very intricate sauce, and he simmered it very slowly in that. Then he took it out. Then he made this other very intricate sauce and poured it over and had all these chilies in it. And then they had this giant camel head on this plate, and he poured all this sauce over it. And then a group of about 8 people stood around, and the sounds that they were making they were enjoying themselves so much. They were eating so quickly, and they were like and they were complimenting him. And this is all in Mandarin or Cantonese.
Yeah.
I don't know. They were complimenting him, and they would toast, and it was just like they ate the whole thing, and I mean, it had to be less than 10 minutes. But he spent, I mean, granted, he bought this camel head, which is, I don't know if I've ever said that sentence before. He bought it. He didn't even go out and, go to the lease and fill the camel feeder. He bought
So
it
tall.
and then spent, I mean, it had to be all cooking times included, 8 hours. And then they knocked that thing out in a mere fraction of the time that they had spent in the preparation of it. And it was all for that. That was all the payoff. And these people, they looked so happy. They looked so happy. And they just like the way they were eating. It was visceral. And I loved it. I was like, this is really cool. It's just like he didn't mind putting in the time. For him, it was just like, oh, these people are going to be so happy when they eat this. This is going to be so good. I'm going to sit here and scrub this camel head for an hour, like with steel wool.
Yeah. Wow.
It was incredible. It's just like little things like that, those little cultural perspectives that you can learn from. And I was just fascinated by it. And I was like, this totally applies. It's just, what is time? How long? I mean, granted, I don't know if I'm going to be like, I'm not Googling camel head right now. Like, I'm not super excited about it. But as a lesson, I was fascinated.
Well, that is fascinating, man. I mean, and I think as I've kind of matured, if I could say that, as through my hunting years, and now it's a lot of times where and I think you kind of maybe touched on a little bit too, like with your daughter there and too, and like I'm on another part where I'm excited to be able to introduce people to hunting. I know what I'm going to get each year, usually at the ranches, and we saw an odd ad pop up, in South Texas there on the properties.
Wow.
Like, oh, that could be interesting. Yeah, just that was pretty wild.
Pretty far east.
And we had an emu in
Oh,
Central Texas
escaping.
there. They escaped, right. Well, because they used to have, for those who didn't know, there was a large populations of emus. There's farms here in Texas, and eventually the market bottomed out horribly, like it was cryptocurrency or something, and like everyone just threw them out into the wild. And so there are still some that come around, but there may be the surprises that we get, but I kind of know what I'm going to get. But I'd love seeing people get their first animal and kind of walk them through those types of steps on how they can better, just to be able to have the most premium experience that they can. A lot of it is the steps that you take along the way, and it is time. And some people might just be like, I'm going to go drop this off at the processor. That's fine. That's what you want to do. The time is not there for you, but a lot of my friends were like, okay, well, that thing that you guys cooked, what'd you do? Well, that's a process. The brining was, 18 hours beforehand. And then there's this. And then, you're slow cooking. We do the smothered chops a lot. from the Afield, I believe it was. And that's something that we definitely share with a lot of folks. And that's a game changer for a lot of people who I don't like hogs. I don't like, they're big hogs. We just leave them for the gut pile. And it's like, nah, there's some other things you can do with them that
Mm-hmm.
are true game changers. So that's one that it's kind of like a gateway, dish for a lot of folks for us. But I think there's so much to be said about that time and what you can put into it. And I think, it is relative. How many, hours a day are people in traffic? How many times
Mm-hmm.
are you waiting around, or you're just scrolling through your phone or whatever it is? It's like, if you look at the time, yeah, that extra 45 minutes of plucking dove is nothing for
Yeah.
what it can get you.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm not trying to shame or guilt or
No.
anything, but I think that it's out there. And sometimes it just takes a little perspective shift for
Yeah.
people to be like, oh, I mean, I could get more enjoyment out of it, or this is the way, I just find it to be the whole process to be inherently enjoyable.
Yeah. Well, it's like
You
some
know?
people will say, it's like, oh, whenever the animal hits the ground, it's like that's when the fun's done, the work begins. It's like, no, that's actually, I think for a lot of people that I know, it's like that's when the fun begins too, because it's like, okay, now I'm starting to see all these dishes and what I'm going to cook with my friends and family and how I'm going to prepare this and what I'm cutting off. It's a different thing, and I kind of wanted to touch base before we let go, as far as new school traditional cookery and that opportunity that people can come have and learn from you and some, Mason and some other folks who are involved there too. Can you maybe tell people about this school, and maybe what is from, kind of beginning of when you're showing up into what's happening, what you're teaching, and what you hope people kind of get out of that?
Yeah. I mean, it's designed to just be a very one-on-one, start to finish program. If you've hunted before or you're an experienced hunter, it's then the focus is usually on the butchery and so forth, the cooking, the breaking down, the packaging, and we go in very deep on that. And if you've never hunted before, then it's start to finish. We start at the range, safety, shot placement,
Mhm.
how to select a hog out of a sounder, all these things. Um, what deer we want to shoot, and management principles, and flora, fauna. We're talking about trees and grasses, and we're talking about artifacts and all kinds of things, and how this all ties in to this experience. And while you're there, we're only eating game from that ranch, so we're going to be eating deer and hog, maybe ducks if we, last year it was great, because Mason, who's our head guide, you had him on your podcast.
Mhm.
um, I mean, incredible guy.
Yeah.
Does very, very adroit, very, very talented, capable person. He'd find some ducks and be like, "Hey," and it's such a great position to be in as a quote unquote outfitter, and be like, "Hey guys, I don't think we should hunt deer tomorrow." Like, if Mason says that we're going to get after some teal in the morning, I would do that, and we
Yeah.
would go out there and knock some teal down, and then we have hog, deer, and teal on the menu, and we can show you how to wax buck to death. So I mean, it's kind of a flexible experience. It's mostly hog and deer oriented. We'll run some trot lines for catfish just to try to get those in the mix.
Yep.
Get some more diversity on the menu, um, and just show you as much as possible. I always tell people as soon as I get there, it's like, you just keep asking questions. There's 6 guides here. There's a chef. There's a chef's assistant. Everybody's been here for years. They know what's up. We're here for you. We want to make you a better whatever it is. Is it a hunter? Is it a cook? Is it a butcher? Like, just in general, how can we empower you? And what knowledge can we impart? And we'll do it in whichever way we can. We're not offering so many classes this year. They sold out. I don't even want to say how fast. I
Super
will.
fast.
4 minutes this year. It's crazy. It's just like, we just can't keep up, and we're due to, the schedule and, holidays and restaurants and so forth, that we're able to do less classes than we've ever done this year. We are partnering with TWA on a class this year, and so there'll be more information about that forthcoming. So we did actually hold one class back, which should be news to some people.
Ooh. And
But
that's
we're
Texas
going.
Wildlife Association.
Correct. Texas Wildlife Association, and there is a seat available to that class. Actually, it might have already sold. I'm at their auction.
Over this last weekend, I think.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's right. I was in somewhere, Paris. So I hope it sold.
I'm sure
Um,
it did.
yeah, and so just very few classes this year, which is kind of a bummer that we're not able to accommodate as many people as we want. That's the thing that I really love. I love new hunter. Actually, just being out in the field with people and the educational aspect. And when you're outside and it's a nice breezy day and everybody's learning, and I think people really enjoy it. We're in our 14th season of that.
Wow, Jesse.
So there's a few programs popping up. We've been doing it for a long time. I think that we've got it fairly dialed, and we are at the end of the day uh, people coming from the restaurant industry. So it's like hospitality is a key component of that, and also
Sure.
we've heard the questions and we know what people are curious about, what their expectations are. What they don't know is what's the unknown part of this program. And so I think that's really enabled us to create a better program year after year, into making it just a really special event for people, which is what we want out of that. It's a great job. I'll tell you that is a cool job, to take new people hunting and then teach them how to cut it up and cook it and then sit down at the table with them for 4 days. It's very, very cool. So yeah, I mean, NSTC, New School of Traditional Cookery. Unfortunately, yeah, it is completely sold out for the year. We don't take any kind of pre-reservations or anything like that. We actually aren't accepting any private bookings this year either. I just wanted to put it all out there to single, like they don't have a whatever, to just one or
Yeah.
two people if they wanted to come, just instead of groups, just to give people the best shot at getting in this year. And it was, it's just we can't even keep up at this point. So we'll hope to be able to expand that a bit in the future, and we're always working on it. But between restaurants and book projects and things like that, it's always a stretch to
Oh,
kind of
you've got
develop.
a lot going, man. Lot going. So it's understandable. And I mean, people can also sign up on your website and they can
Mm-hmm.
kind of, there's newsletters there. I remember, I got the email notification. Hey guys, reminder, it's coming up, and people can follow you on the socials and things there too. If you just
Yep.
want to go ahead and plug out your websites real quick where people can actually go in and sign up to be notified for these kinds of things.
Yeah. So Dai Due, Daidue, is the restaurant on the east side of Austin. We're open for dinner Tuesday through Sundays, open for brunch Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that website also has a New School of Traditional Cookery page on it where you can go and sign up for the mailing list and get a lot of information about what the classes look like, kind of more of a timeline on it. Also, contact information on there. To get the Hog Book, it's thehogbook.com. Pretty straightforward. You can get some Hog Book, some Hog Book merch, which I see that you also have. Thank you.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you're welcome.
Afield, my first book came out a long time ago. You can get that from my man Jeff Bezos over there. He's got plenty of them in stock. That's probably you can also buy it at the restaurant.
Yeah.
You can also get the Hog Book at the restaurant. You can also get the Hog Book. The only other place that you can get it is on the MeatEater store.
Yep. The
in their
meateater.com.
in their book section. So we're proud of that too. That they liked it enough to put it on their store. I think follow us on social. Dai Due. My personal is Sacalait, SAC.A.LAIT. It's the Cajun word for crappie.
Crappie. That's connection there, huh?
Yeah.
Is that one of your favorites?
It is.
Yeah.
I have an obsession with crappie. I love them. They're the coolest fish. Well, we can't even start on that at this point.
Oh, I know. We're ending this.
We'll have to do it again.
If you'd like to come on another time, there's a lot of things I want to talk about with you. Obviously, we got some, maybe to be continued. We'll give us some teasers. Drumming, Questlove, MeatEater. There's a lot of different things there too that I definitely want to dive into. So if you're down, we'll do a version 2 sometime if that's cool.
Sounds good.
Good deal. Great. I'll bring you dewberries as a payment. There,
I want to pick them. I got to be out there.
There you go. There you go. Cool, man. I'll send you some Onyx files then. How about that?
I love
it. Well, one last question before we go. You can kind of just give us, your thoughts of like your legacy. What do you want how do you want to be remembered, in the professional and the personal, aspect there too? And, yeah, just kind of what's your thoughts there on your legacy?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, I think for me, I love education. I love imparting any knowledge that I have. I feel more and more and more willing to share as the years go on. Sometimes when you're young, you want to keep it, and
Mm-hmm.
then as you get older, sometimes you're like, ain't no reasons. Let's get this out there. And I love sharing knowledge. I also love gaining knowledge, and so I think that I'm to a point where it's going to be really important not only to just teach people, but teach teachers, And I think that I would like to be in a position someday where our programs were so good or so effective that we could start not only, you know, having clients come in and learn, but having people come in and learn and seeing the people flourish that are working for us. And that goes for the restaurant and NSTC or anything. And I think that's really important. It's just to kind of keep that going, because we're at an important time as a species. I think we're doing some things poorly. We're doing some things in really great ways too. And I think that, stewardship, the outdoors, connection to food, connection to our resources, in my mind, is some of the most important aspects of being human. And we need to kind of sometimes, I know that I need to get over myself sometimes and just think like, hey, what's the best thing for everyone? And it's like, it's our kids, our grandkids, and enabling people to be, positive movers in the future. And so I think it's just like, you got knowledge, let's get it out there.
Mhm. Well, great answer there, man. Thank you for sharing that, and thanks for coming on. And we really appreciate your time and all that you shared. I know that there's a lot that people are going to learn, and we've told everyone where to go. I'll have some links in the bottom here too as well. And yeah, man, looking forward to saying hello in person again and
Yeah.
getting over to your restaurant. I know I'm overdue for a visit, so I need to get back there and try some aoudad.
Yeah. Let me know if you're coming in. All right.
All right, I will. I will,
All right.
bud.
All right.
Well, hey,
Thanks.
man, thanks again. You have a great afternoon, and yeah, we'll talk soon.
All right. We'll do.
Take care.
Cool.
Hey, everybody. Just wanted to take a moment to tell you about Sharing the Land. For those unfamiliar, Sharing the Land is an initiative that was brought together by Doug Duran to bring land access seekers and landowners together to form these unions to be able to better benefit the property. Very conservational minded, but it's also about getting people out there and sharing these experiences out on these properties and having them work in a more uniformed way to better benefit the property and the habitat. Um, my company, Map My Ranch, which I work with Colin Williams, we make maps for people's properties all around the country, right? And one of the things that we do to be a part of this organization is we offer to make maps for the landowners. So if you sign up as a landowner, we're going to go ahead and put together a map for you, which shows your property, your boundary, and maybe any of the things that you want to have labeled. Maybe it's certain overlooks, or maybe it's certain, fencing areas where you're going to have this type of agricultural work done, or maybe you're going ahead and growing this, maybe these are some native seeds that you're focusing on. Whatever it is that you want to go ahead and have mapped, we're going to do that for you. That's a part of our contribution. We are a very proud sponsor of Sharing the Land, and will be for a long time. Love working with Doug. Wonderful, wonderful man. And this is a wonderful project. I highly suggest you guys go check it out. And there's a whole team of sponsors and partners that are a part of this that are just top notch. Go check out sharingtheland.com, and also go check out dougduran.com to learn more about all the wonderful things he's doing.